The Volkswagen brand has been synonymous with iconic cars like the Beetle and the beloved microbus that cruised through hippie culture. Today, it stands tall as one of the world's largest car manufacturers, competing in the electric vehicle market. But beyond the shiny cars and advertisements lies a sinister history that the company would rather forget. Volkswagen's origins under Hitler and the Nazi vision.
At the meeting, Hitler showed an impressive knowledge of cars, producing rough sketches and adding to Porsche's 5-point plan for the people's car.
In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler's obsession with modernizing Germany extended far beyond military aspirations. He sought to transform the country into an industrial powerhouse with new infrastructure, streamlined transportation systems, and affordable products designed for the so-called Aryan race. Central to his vision was the concept of a Volksgemeinschaft, or people's community, where class divisions would be eradicated and Germans would unite under National Socialism. Cars were a key symbol in this vision, representing progress, individual freedom, and unity. However, car ownership in 1930s Germany was a luxury far out of reach for most citizens. To solve this, Hitler commissioned Austrian engineer Ferdinand Porsche in 1934 to create an inexpensive car that ordinary Germans could afford. The specifications were clear. It needed to carry 2 adults and 3 children, have a robust engine capable of handling Germany's emergent Autobahn network, and be fuel efficient. Porsche, who had already designed prototypes for similar cars, took up the challenge and developed what would eventually become the KDF wagon, named after the Nazi labor program Strength Through Joy. Hitler marketed the KDF wagon as a revolutionary product, calling it the people's car, the Volkswagen. It was a masterpiece of propaganda. The Nazi regime created slick advertisements showing happy, blonde-haired families riding through scenic German countrysides. In May 1938, Hitler personally laid the foundation stone for the Volkswagen factory near Fallersleben, declaring the project a victory for National Socialism and the German people. The factory, which was to produce millions of these cars annually, became the centerpiece of Nazi industrial planning. To fund the project, Germans were encouraged to participate in a savings program administered by the German Labor Front. Participants purchased stamps for 5 Reichsmarks each and pasted them into savings books until they reached the 990 Reichsmarks required to claim a car. By 1939, over 300,000 Germans had enrolled in the program, yet their contributions turned out to be a cruel scam. When war erupted, not a single KDF wagon was delivered to a civilian. The funds were instead funneled into armament production, and the factory shifted its focus to military vehicles. Volkswagen, once presented as a tool for uplifting ordinary Germans, became a symbol of deception and a key cog in Hitler's war machine. Forced labor and concentration camps at Volkswagen. When World War II began, Volkswagen's lofty promise of producing cars for the people crumbled entirely. The Fallersleben plan, designed for civilian car production, was quickly repurposed to manufacture military vehicles essential to the Nazi war effort. These included the Kubelwagen, a jeep-like vehicle used extensively by German forces, and the Schwimmwagen, an amphibious car suited for rough terrain and river crossings. The rapid militarization of Volkswagen's operations required enormous manpower. With millions of German men sent to the front lines, Nazi authorities turned to forced labor to sustain wartime production. Volkswagen became one of the first German companies to employ forced laborers, setting a grim precedent for industrial complicity in Nazi crimes. By the height of the war, over 60% of Volkswagen's workforce consisted of forced laborers, including Soviet prisoners of war, concentration camp inmates, and civilians forcibly deported from Eastern Europe. In April 1942, Volkswagen's direct involvement in Nazi atrocities escalated when it established the Arbeitsdorf concentration camp on factory grounds. The camp, initially presented as a model for labor efficiency, subjected prisoners to brutal conditions. They were forced to work grueling shifts under constant surveillance, malnourished and exposed to disease. Death was a daily occurrence due to exhaustion, untreated injuries, and physical abuse. The company's relationship with concentration camps deepened as the war progressed. By 1944, Volkswagen had become a sub-camp of the notorious Neuengamme concentration camp, where over 40,000 prisoners perished. One particularly harrowing incident involved a Volkswagen engineer who personally traveled to Auschwitz to select 300 skilled Jewish workers to labor at the factory. Jewish women were transferred as well, tasked with assembling military munitions under intolerable conditions. The factory grounds housed 4 concentration camps and 8 forced labor camps, making Volkswagen a significant player in Nazi Germany's exploitation network. Survivors described the factory as a living hell. Forced laborers were housed in overcrowded barracks with little protection from the elements. Meals consisted of thin soup and scraps of bread, insufficient to sustain the brutal work schedules. Disease spread rapidly through the camp, and medical care was virtually non-existent. Many workers were beaten or worked to death when they could no longer keep pace with production demands. A Polish forced laborer later recalled the dehumanizing experience. Quote, "I understood then that I am a slave. I was an object that can work." Volkswagen's industrial output came at the cost of untold human suffering, forever tying its wartime success to the exploitation of innocent lives. The horrors of Volkswagen's child victims. Many of the women brought to work at the factory arrived pregnant, while others became pregnant during their time in captivity. Initially, Nazi authorities deported pregnant laborers back to their home countries, viewing them as unproductive. But as the war dragged on and manpower became scarcer, officials reversed this policy. Pregnant workers were now forced to remain at their posts. To address this, Volkswagen established a so-called nursery facility on its grounds in 1943. These facilities, far from offering care, were little more than death camps for infants. Mothers were separated from their newborns almost immediately and sent back to work, while the children were left in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions with no proper medical care. At the Volkswagen facility, neglect and starvation claimed the lives of countless infants. A nearby facility in ruin recorded a near-total mortality rate, with 365 infants and toddlers perishing under appalling conditions. The factory physician, Dr. Hans Korbel, oversaw this cruel operation, ensuring mothers returned to work while their children were left to die. Post-war reckoning and Volkswagen's rise.
Germany is only going to survive and not fall victim to communism if people can have a livelihood again.
By the time Allied forces liberated the Volkswagen factory in April 1945, the facility had become a graveyard for forced laborers and a symbol of Nazi exploitation. The British military took control of the plant and assessed its potential to meet immediate transportation needs in war-torn Germany. Major Ivan Hurst, tasked with overseeing production, recognized the car's utility and began reviving the Beetle's manufacture. The post-war years saw Volkswagen rise from the ashes. Heinrich Nordhoff, a former Opel engineer, was appointed to lead the company. He rebranded the Beetle as a symbol of West Germany's economic recovery, cleverly sidestepping its Nazi origin. Volkswagen became an international success, and the Beetle transformed into an icon of practicality, simplicity, and reliability. For decades, the company avoided confronting its complicity in wartime crimes. The horrors of forced labor, concentration camps, and the abuse of women and children were buried beneath the narrative of Germany's Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle. It wasn't until the 1980s that Volkswagen began to acknowledge its past. Under public pressure, the company commissioned historian Hans Mommsen to conduct a thorough investigation into its wartime activities. In the 90s, Volkswagen began offering reparations to survivors and funding Holocaust-related institutions, albeit decades too late for many victims. Now it's time to hear from you. Are you surprised to learn about Volkswagen's dark past? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.